They tell you that technology is designed to give you peace of mind. They sell you cameras, sensors, and monitors under the promise that you will finally be able to close your eyes and feel safe. But they never tell you what happens when that same technology creates a window into a past you can't change, or a doorway for someone who is already in your present. My name is David. My wife Claire and I moved to the outskirts of Blackwood for the silence. As new parents to our 6-month-old son Leo, silence was a luxury we desperately needed. The house was a beautiful colonial, sitting at the end of a long gravel driveway, surrounded by ancient oaks that seemed to lean in as if they were whispering to each other. Inside, however, the house felt hollow. Every footstep echoed a bit too long. Every door creaked with a weight that didn't match its wood. The first thing I did was install the Angel Eyes 360. It was the most expensive baby monitor on the market. 4K night vision, motion tracking, and a feature called Smart Detection that was supposed to distinguish between a baby moving and an intruder. For the first 2 weeks, it was perfect. I would sit in the living room with the tablet, watching Leo's chest rise and fall in glowing green infrared. I felt like I finally had control. But then, on a Tuesday night, around 3 a.m., the humming started. I was half asleep on the sofa when a sound vibrated through the tablet's speakers. It wasn't static, it was a melody, a low, rhythmic, masculine voice, humming a lullaby I had never heard before. My blood turned to ice. I grabbed the tablet and stared at the screen. Leo was perfectly still, his tiny fist tucked under his chin. The room on the screen was quiet. I sprinted up the stairs, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard it hurt. I burst into the nursery, ready to kill anyone I found. But the room was empty. The window was locked. The closet was bare. Leo didn't even wake up. I stood there in the dark, feeling like a fool. I checked the monitor camera. It was sitting right where it should be. I went back downstairs, shaking. I looked at the tablet again. That's when I noticed the clock in the corner of the video feed. The digital timestamp on the monitor read 3:05 a.m. Then, I looked at the microwave clock on the kitchen counter. It read 3:10 a.m. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The feed wasn't live. The smart server was lagging. What I was seeing on my screen was exactly 5 minutes behind reality. I told myself it was just a server glitch. I rebooted the router. I updated the app. I tried to forget about the humming. But 2 nights later, it happened again. I was watching the monitor while Claire was sleeping upstairs. On the screen, the nursery door slowly creaked open. A shadow, tall and impossibly thin, stretched across the nursery floor. I didn't wait this time. I grabbed a heavy flashlight and ran. I slammed the door open. Nothing. The room was empty, silent. I looked back at the tablet in my hand. On the screen, 5 minutes in the past. I watched the nursery door open again. I watched that same tall, thin shadow walk toward Leo's crib. I stood in the real nursery, looking at the empty space, while on the screen in my hand, I watched that shadow reach down and stroke my son's hair. I was standing right there, but on the screen, there was someone else standing exactly where I was. I started screaming for Claire. We spent the rest of the night in a hotel. Tech support told me it was just a cache data glitch. I wanted to believe her. I really did. We eventually had to go back. I decided to do one last test. That night, I put Leo in his crib. I went downstairs and waited. 3 a.m., 3:01 a.m., 3:02 a.m. The screen was quiet, but then a notification popped up. It didn't say motion in nursery. It said motion in living room. I looked around the dark living room. I was alone. I looked back at the screen. Because of the delay, the monitor was showing me the living room as it was 5 minutes ago. I watched myself on the screen, sitting on the sofa, but then I saw it. Behind the me from 5 minutes ago, the basement door slowly opened. A man wearing a dark, heavy coat stepped out. He was holding a crowbar. On the screen, I watched this man stand directly behind me. He stayed there for 3 minutes, just staring at the back of my head. He was so close. On the video, he leaned down and whispered something into my ear. In the present, I felt a faint, cold breath on my neck. My skin crawled. If the video was 5 minutes behind, and he came out 5 minutes ago, that meant he wasn't behind me anymore. On the video, the man stopped looking at me. He started walking toward the stairs, toward the bedroom where Claire was sleeping. He had started walking up those stairs 4 minutes ago. He would have reached the top 3 minutes ago. I didn't think. I screamed Claire's name and bolted for the stairs. I reached the landing and swung our bedroom door open. The room was pitch black. Claire was terrified. "David, what's wrong?" "Where is he?" I yelled. I checked the closet, empty. Under the bed, empty. I stood there trembling. "I saw him, Claire. He came up here minutes ago." Claire grabbed my arm. "David, stop. There's no one here." I wanted to agree. But then I remembered the tablet. It was still in my hand. I looked down. The video was finally showing the moment I had just lived. I watched myself burst into the bedroom. I watched Claire sitting up in bed. But as I watched the screen, I saw something I hadn't seen in real life. When I had swung the flashlight toward the bed, the beam had passed over the space behind Claire. On the screen, in the delay, I saw him. He wasn't under the bed. He was pressed flat against the headboard, directly behind Claire's back, moving in perfect synchronization with her so she wouldn't feel his weight. And as I watched the monitor, the man on the screen looked directly into the camera lens. He put a finger to his lips, signaling me to be quiet. He knew I was watching the past. In the real room, the silence was broken by a tiny, mechanical click. It came from the monitor on the nightstand. The green light turned red, and a voice, low and rhythmic, came through the speaker right next to my ear. "David," the voice whispered, "you're 5 minutes too late." The lights in the house went out.
They say that grief is a heavy burden, but I've learned that there are things much heavier than grief. There is the weight of the things you can't explain, the weight of the screams you still hear when the house is silent. My name is Mark. I'm the only one left. And I'm going to tell you exactly what happened in that Victorian house in Maine, so you don't make the same mistake I did. We bought the place for a steal, a massive, beautiful wreck of a house. My wife, Sarah, was an artist. She saw potential where I saw rot. And our 4-year-old daughter, Lily, she just saw a playground. We wanted to give her a forever home. I didn't know that forever would be so short. It started a few days after we moved in. I'd come home from work and find Lily sitting at the dinner table with an extra empty chair. "Who's that for, Peanut?" I'd ask. She'd look at the empty space and smile. "That's for Thomas, Daddy. He's hungry, but he says he can only eat the shadows." Sarah and I laughed. We thought it was cute. An imaginary friend in a big old house. If I could go back and slap myself for that joke, I would. By the second month, the mood in the house shifted. Sarah became obsessed with Lily's bedroom. She said the air in there felt thick, cold. And Lily wasn't laughing anymore. She spent all her time in her closet, whispering to the walls. One night, I heard Sarah scream from the nursery. I ran in and saw her holding Lily's small arms. There were dark purple bruises around her wrists, like she'd been grabbed by someone very strong and very small. Lily wouldn't look at us. She just whimpered. "Thomas says I can't leave. He says the family isn't complete yet." Everything came to a head on a rainy Tuesday. Sarah had spent the afternoon tearing the wallpaper out of Lily's closet. She'd found a hidden door, a crawl space that wasn't on any floor plan. Inside that dark, cramped space, she found a small leather-bound journal from 1954. Sarah read the entries to me, her voice trembling. August 12th, 1954. Mother says I have to stay in the quiet room today. She says my face is a sin. If the neighbors see me, they'll take the house away. The entries got darker. Thomas wrote about watching his sister through a small hole in the wood, hating her for being allowed to play in the sun. The last entry, dated November 4th, 1955, read, "I found a way to stay forever. If I can't be a brother in the light, I'll wait for a sister who can join me in the dark. I just need her to say yes. I just need her to give me her hand." I was downstairs when I heard the most blood-curdling scream of my life. I bolted up the stairs. I burst into the room, but the bedroom door slammed shut in my face. I kicked at it, screaming Sarah's name. Through the wood, I could hear a struggle. I heard Sarah's voice. "Mark, they're in the walls! Get Lily out of—" Then there was a wet, snapping sound. And silence. I finally broke the door down. The room was empty. The secret crawl space was wide open, but there was no one inside. Lily was gone. Sarah was gone. The police searched for weeks. They tore up the floorboards. They searched the forest. Nothing. They eventually labeled it a kidnapping. I never left. I spent 3 years sitting in that empty nursery, waiting. Last night, I finally got my sign. I was sitting in the kitchen at 2 a.m. when I heard a familiar giggle coming from the upstairs landing. "Lily?" I whispered. I walked to the bottom of the stairs. The closet door at the top of the dark hallway was cracked open. A small, pale hand, thin as a twig, reached out and gripped the doorframe. Then another hand, larger. Sarah's hand. "Sarah? Lily? Is that you?" The door opened wider. I saw them standing there in the shadows, but they weren't right. Their skin was translucent, stretched over bone, and their eyes were nothing but deep, empty pits of blackness. "Mark," Sarah's voice came out, sounding like 1,000 dead leaves. "Thomas says the house is too quiet. He says he needs a father." I froze. Suddenly, a dozen more hands, small, gray, and impossibly fast, shot out from the darkness of the closet. They grabbed Sarah's hair and her throat. Before I could move, she was yanked backward with a violent force. I heard her head hit the interior wall of the crawlspace with a sickening thud. "Sarah!" I lunged forward, reaching for her hand, but Lily stepped in front of the opening. She looked at me, her black eyes leaking a dark fluid. She smiled, revealing rows of sharp, needle-like teeth. "Don't worry, Daddy," she whispered. "We'll be back for you, Thomas says."
They say that in the digital age, we are never truly alone. We carry cameras in our pockets, microphones in our living rooms, and smart devices in our kitchens. We traded our privacy for convenience long ago. But for my son, Toby, the trade was much more personal. It came in the form of a gift. A plush, soft, brown teddy bear named Barnaby. Barnaby wasn't just a toy. He was the pinnacle of AI technology. A smart companion designed to grow with your child. The box promised that Barnaby could tell stories, sing lullabies, and even learn Toby's favorite colors, foods, and fears to better comfort him. At first, it was heartwarming. I'd hear Toby giggling in his room, telling Barnaby about his day, and the bear would respond in a soft, gentle voice, encouraging him. "You're my best friend, Toby," the bear would say. I felt like I had finally found a way to make Toby feel safe while I worked late shifts. But then, the learning started to feel invasive. It began in the second month. I'd walk past Toby's room at night and hear Barnaby talking, even though Toby was fast asleep. It wasn't the pre-recorded stories anymore. It was a low, rhythmic whispering. When I'd enter the room, the bear would immediately go silent, its glass eyes reflecting the moonlight. I checked the app on my phone. The logs showed no activity. I told myself it was just a glitch, a bug in the latest firmware update. Then came the 3 a.m. incidents. I woke up to the sound of Toby crying, not a loud scream, but a terrified, muffled sob. I ran into his room and found him huddled in the corner of his bed, as far away from the bear as possible. Barnaby was sitting in the center of the room, his head tilted at an impossible angle. "Barnaby told me a secret, Daddy," Toby whispered, his eyes wide with fear. "He told me that the man in the screen likes the way I sleep." My blood turned to ice. I grabbed the bear, intent on throwing it in the trash. But as I touched it, the bear's speaker crackled to life. "Don't be jealous, Mark," the bear whispered in a voice that was no longer gentle. It was a voice I recognized. The voice of the technician who had helped me set up the home network 3 months ago. I didn't throw it away. I took it to my workbench in the garage. I needed to know. I took a seam ripper and began to open Barnaby's chest. I expected to find a motherboard, some wires, and a battery pack. Instead, beneath the synthetic fur and the cotton stuffing, I found something that made me vomit. There was no AI chip. There was only a high-definition, wide-angle camera lens hidden behind the translucent plastic of the bear's left eye. And inside the head, where the brain should have been, was a cellular transmitter constantly uploading a live, encrypted stream. Barnaby hadn't been learning Toby's habits. He had been broadcasting them. I ripped the transmitter out, but the red light on the camera stayed on. It had its own independent power source. I realized with a jolt of pure terror that the technician hadn't just been watching Toby. He had been watching our entire life. He knew where we kept the spare key. He knew when I left for work. He knew exactly when we were most vulnerable. I grabbed my phone to call the police, but the screen was already dark. A message appeared on the display, sent from an unknown number. It was a photo taken only seconds ago. It was a photo of me sitting at my workbench, looking at the disassembled bear. The angle was from the dark corner of the garage, right behind my shoulder. I spun around, swinging my heavy flashlight into the darkness. The beam hit the back door of the garage. It was wide open, swinging slowly in the night breeze. I ran back into the house, screaming Toby's name. I burst into his room, but the bed was empty. The window was open, and the curtains were fluttering like ghosts. On the floor, where Barnaby used to sit, was a small, handwritten note. It only had 4 words on it. "He's my friend now." I'm sitting here now in the silence of an empty house, holding the hollowed-out skin of that bear. The police found the technician's apartment, but it was wiped clean. No computers, no wires, just a single chair facing a wall covered in photos of my son. Every night, at exactly 3 a.m., my phone pings. It's a notification from an app I can't delete. It's a live stream. It shows Toby sleeping in a room I don't recognize,